Hi Redeemer. Philippians chapter 2, verses 1 to 11 are well-known verses, and for good reason. This description of Jesus is one of the most amazing in the entire Bible. We see in Philippians chapter 2, verses 5 to 11, that Jesus is Lord, that he was in very nature God, yet he humbled himself. As God, he humbled himself. He took the nature of a person. Yet again, we see that because he humbled himself, even to the point of death, he was raised up, and that every knee will one day bow because Jesus is Lord. This is rightly known as a passage that tells us much about Jesus, and we should revel in this, rejoice in this. But in its context, this is a passage which is calling the Philippians and us to action. It's calling us to live humble lives. It's calling us to serve. And this information he brings in about Jesus as Lord, as the one who humbles himself, that's all meant to point us to our own service and love and humility. So as we look at this passage this week, let's rejoice in who Jesus is, yet let's also let who Jesus is and what he's done for us drive us to radical service and love. I think it's especially helpful to remember that when it says that Jesus was in very nature God, it's not saying that even though he was God, he humbled himself, because humbling yourself is a very ungodlike thing to do. I think this verse tells us that Jesus shows us exactly what God is like. Jesus is in every way God. And when we see God most clearly, we see God shockingly come to serve. And I think that changes what it looks like for us to serve. We don't say, even Jesus had to humble himself, so I guess I should serve too. When we serve, when we put others' needs first, we're doing the most godlike thing we could be doing. But secondly, I love that Jesus is our example here, and that as Jesus humbled himself, then the Father raised him up and exalted him. And we're full of all kinds of fears when we're called to put others' needs first, that we'll be trampled over, that no one will ever stand up for us. But in this passage, as we follow Jesus downward in humility, I think we can trust that as Jesus was raised up by the Father, we too, in his time, will be raised up by the Father. We have nothing to fear. We can have the very same mind as Christ. So I hope you enjoy thinking through this by yourselves and together this week.